Hello, good morning. Hi, everybody. I'm here to introduce Pádraig Yeates, who's going to share his own experience of 2013 via 1913 with you this morning. Pádraig is a journalist, an activist, and a distinguished social and labour historian. His books include Lockout, Dublin 2013, which is a fantastic book if you haven't read it. Take the opportunity. A City in Wartime, A City in Turmoil, and A City in Revolution. We got to know Pádraig a good deal better during 2013, which, as you all know, was the centenary of the Lockout. And during that year, he was particularly active in mounting a very engaged commemoration campaign. And indeed, the reason we got to know him a little better during that time was that he was a very valuable source of information and a resource to us in mounting our own production of The Risen People just over a year ago. The reason we've asked Pádraig to come and speak to us this morning is because it struck us that his approach to commemorating 1913 was a particularly active and engaged process. And really, we've asked him to speak about it as a sort of a case study in how an active act of commemoration can actually be an agent for change in the present day. So will you please welcome Pádraig Yeates.
Right, thanks very much. I could, like I suppose a lot of people, I could count on one hand the number of times I've been in a theatre anywhere in the world, certainly on two hands before 2013. But one of the very interesting things was in the year how much of our work ended up being related to theatre work and to groups ranging from the National Theatre here, the Abbey, to groups like RAID in the South Inner City. And for people who don't know, RAID stands for Recovery Through Art, Drama and Education. And most of the people there are recovering from addictions of one sort or another. And that was one of the most interesting experiences we had. So theatre actually became quite important. I don't really know what I can tell you about commemoration. I don't particularly like commemorations. I don't like the tyranny of commemorations where people obsess about something for a few weeks or maybe a year and then they rush off to obsess about something else. And there's very little residue left. And often the residue is quite dangerous. I mean, to some extent you can trace back what happened in 1916 and afterwards to the centenary of 1898. This year we have a bicentenary, which is Waterloo. And they had to cancel the centenary in 1915 because everybody was still fighting each other, but they'd all changed sides, apart from the Dutch who were neutral, learned some sense. So it is a problem. And I think in Ireland, because we have this problem, we can't get away from sort of glorious failure. What if, you know, if the other side, if the right side had won? Because the people who concentrate on these things tend to be people who feel that their side, they've adopted a side and that side lost and it should have won, and now we want to reverse that decision. And that's really been the history of this country since at least 1922. I was involved in a few of these attempts myself, and I can only say I'm very relieved we failed, because if we'd won, we'd have made an even bigger mess of things than the people who did remain in control of things. So having said that, you know, how did we approach the lockout? And as I say, I've been involved in a few attempts to rewrite history when I was younger, maybe a bit more optimistic about life. You know, I didn't come to this with a great deal of enthusiasm, although I felt we should do it. And I suppose about commemoration, one thing I'd say to you is don't do it unless you want to do it. Don't do it. Sometimes you have to do it because someone else is paying you. But otherwise, I wouldn't get involved unless you think you're going to enjoy yourself or get some satisfaction out of it. So I'm just looking at my notes here. And I suppose in 1913, you know, we had the lockout. It was one of our glorious failures, one of our defeats. And not only did we have something where they'd lost, but we had something where a lot of the issues had gone out of fashion. I mean, I think looking back, most of us now would agree it's not a bad idea for women to have the vote. for example, which was one of the issues in 1913, or it's not a bad idea for parents to have guardianship, effective guardianship of their children, rather than leave it to the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is one of the few people who were around and had a very big stick, or Crozier in 1913, who don't really feature very much in modern Irish life. But other things we were fighting for, and I suppose the key one for a lot of us was union recognition, really, and collective bargaining, you know, is unfashionable or became unfashionable. So that was a key issue for us in coming back to this, because, you know, it was not just unfashionable. I mean, it was almost a crime. If you read the Sunday Independent in particular, and Shane Ross in particular, week after week, he was bashing unions. Now, he did it by bashing public sector unions and painting them as a selfish interest group. So we had to try and get back to, you know, to the basics. And I suppose one of the advantages we had with the departure of the Catholic Church, it meant that Murphyism had sort of lost its moralistic foliage. And it had emerged as naked greed, uninhibited greed. So that was a plus on our part. And there was that sense percolating already through people after several years of austerity that maybe, you know, a chase after wealth for its own sake wasn't going to work for them. I think a lot of people would still be on that treadmill looking for make more money if they're actually making more money. But in fact, they're running faster on the treadmill to get less. And that message is beginning to percolate through. And I think we played a small part in that. So we came to the lockout with a number of issues, and I better look at my notes here. I forget half of them. When you reach my age, you know, you do need notes. Believe me, you'll get there. Well, I hope you get there. So what were the issues? Well, we felt that some of the old-fashioned notions we wanted to promote was that people have mutual responsibilities towards each other as well as individual rights. And we thought it was important that people, you know, embrace at least some aspects of social solidarity with the concomitant right that if, you know, you are in trouble, you can expect, there can be an expectation, you don't have to beg, there should be an expectation that other people will help you out, especially if you're very young, especially if you're going through a bad patch in your life, or like myself, if you're simply getting older and you've become more aware of your vulnerabilities. And I say in the process, one of the things we wanted to do was rehabilitate unions, because unions are still one of the ways in which people do help each other. I was talking to a couple of young musicians there only yesterday, trying to encourage them to join the musicians' union, and I said, there's a sub, and it's £8 a month, and then there's another 50 cent or something on top of that. I couldn't remember the amount. And what's that for? I said, well, that's the sort of mutual sort of aid fund. I can't remember what the name of it is. There may be people here in the audience who can correct me on this. I said, you pay that as well, so it's to help other members if they're going through a bad patch or mortality benefit, that type of thing. So you know, unions are part of that. They may have become selfish. Some of them may even have become corrupt on occasion. Very rarely, actually. And when it does happen, there's a huge media spotlight on it. But generally speaking, unions are not perfect because they're made up of human beings. But they're one of the few ways we have in our type of society where people can share things around. And in return, you know, we believe that people should give a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. And that was one of Jim Larkin's slogans, actually. It's not mentioned as often as some of the more melodramatic ones, but it's probably one of the ones that do frighten people, employers, I should say, more than, you know, revolutionary rhetoric. I want to be paid a decent wage. Can have a chilling effect on many employers. So did we succeed? I don't know, to be honest. We succeeded to some extent. I think we did help create that more benign climate, that looking back, people saying not just about 1913, but other critical dates, say like 1945 as well. You know, there was a time when people did try and do something better and succeeded to some extent. I mean, I grew up mainly in England. We emigrated like lots of people in England, and I grew up in a welfare state. And I was shocked, actually, when I came back to Dublin. I heard that kids didn't get free school books. You know, they didn't get free ink in the inkwells in the desk. I mean, kids got everything in England. When I was a kid growing up, you went down to the Ministry of Rationing and Food every week with my mother, and she got a bottle of concentrated orange juice because it was austerity Britain. But the government made sure, the Labour government at the time, that every single child in the country got that bottle of orange juice to get them their vitamin C until the next week. So these things do matter. And collective bargaining, as I say, matters. So I'm just going to go on very quickly to the slides and go through a few of them. Sorry, I should have pressed this sooner. I'm going to start, with Eric O'Brien, who was one of the Living the Lockout actors. And I just started with Eric because every day, 6 times a day, he had to have that red stuff, I don't know, tomato sauce or whatever it is, put on his face because he'd been battened by the DMP and had to have it wiped off again and put on again. So I thought if anyone deserved a mention individually, it had to be Eric. And he's an actor, and it's the Abbey. So, and he didn't, but his colleague, the other main player in that piece, Lloyd Cooney, actually acted in The Risen People at the end of the year. So they're both central to it. One thing I would say to you, if you're involved in a centenary or commemoration, start early. I started in 2011, and it still wasn't early enough. There was a lot of serendipity about it. Other people had ideas, and it's only when you go around knocking on doors and talking to other people you find out what they are. That picture, it's snowing, actually. It's not just my bad photography, but the tram, which we also found, and we got them to do it up. We paid for it. When I say we, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions paid for it, basically. But we got them to join Jim Larkin's union on one side, and we got votes for women on the other. And it was done in period because the tram, the Transport Museum will not, you can't buy them in that sense. They'll only put on stuff that they're happy with and is in period for their vehicles. So they did that, and that was used to launch the One City, One Book project, which in 2013, again, the Dublin City Library had the sense to make James Plunkett's wonderful Strumpet City. And if there's any one book everyone should read on the Lockout, it's Plunkett's book. It's wonderful. So they launched that last year. It was the first time they launched a book for the One City, One Book campaign or program that actually became a bestseller again. It's gone on since. But I think they learned that, if you pick the right book, people will actually buy it, or they will go to the library. So, again, the James Plunkett Short Story Award, we kick-started that by getting, a donation from Congress, €2,000, which was a lot of money for a short story competition in this country, and attracted record audiences. Can't remember who won it. Sorry about that. But my apologies if they're in the audience. Michael D became the patron of the tapestry, which we did, the Lockout tapestry, down the road here in Liberty Hall and across the road in Tara House, where CIE gave us a building. They had empty office space. We went to Narmer. I didn't like to go to Narmer because I thought if we do this, someone will make hay out of it. But they didn't. They weren't interested. Nobody was interested except CIE. And again, it was through a union contact, Ken Fleming, who I mentioned again, who was a bus driver, former Formula 2 champion, motorbike champion, and he went and saw the managers who he'd fought with all his life, and he said, look, can you give us a dig out here? We explained what it was about, and they said, yeah, and they didn't want any publicity for it because they were afraid if they mentioned they were giving us empty office space in the city, they'd be lambasted in the Dáil by people for wasting taxpayers' money. If a private company had done it, or if NARM had done it, they'd probably pat it on the back and say how wonderful and visionary they were. But it shows the sort of public ethos of the world we live in. Michael D supported us all the way. It's great to have a president as patron for something because it opens a lot of doors. The bad news is if you have the president as patron, you can't have any other patrons and the president doesn't have any money. So you have to raise the money elsewhere. But it was still great to have him. Making the tapestry. One of the things, if you're going to do a commemoration, try and involve as many people as possible. And that's why we did the tapestry. We had 180 adults, just over 180 adults, and 60 school children, primary and secondary, who worked on the tapestry. And that was their way of finding out about it, because when they're, I think it's a great way, talking about reconciliation, I would strongly recommend tapestry making to everybody. Because if people do have needles, but they're sitting down usually, and there's a table separating them with a large piece of cloth on it, and they're stitching, or they're knitting, or they're doing something relatively peaceful. And what can you talk about except what you're making? And a lot of, I remember, I met people who came and joined the group, and they'd stitch anything. They'd stitch swastikas for us if we'd asked them to. just the opportunity. And they do this all the time. And having made the thing, they put it in a drawer and they leave it to their grandchildren, who probably throw it in the bin. But this was an opportunity to make something that they could not only enjoy doing and be proud of, but would be displayed. And one of the problems we have is that Liberty Hall, as some of you may know, got knocked back for rebuilding, and unfortunately we designed the tapestry so big it would have a special area in Liberty Hall, in the new Liberty Hall, but it's so big it won't fit into the old one. There's no space really available. So if there's anyone out there who wants to display it, I'd be glad to talk to them. It will be in the Civic Archive in Pearse Street next month, and it will be in Glasnevin later in the year. But we really are having difficulty finding places because it costs, if you do a big tapestry, it costs money to transport it. But there's Mary Hunter and Joan. I can't think of Joan's second name. One, and I use that one because Kathy Henderson is there, one of the artists. Kathy contracted cancer. It's very serious cancer. She's dead now. She was only given a few weeks to live. But she kept working on with Robert Ballard, they were the two workers, and her work rate actually increased, and they gave her because she wanted to finish it before she died, and they eventually gave her these sort of experimental miracle drug tablets. They didn't cure her, but they kept her alive for over a year, and when she kept bringing in the work, and we kept saying to her, you know, keep taking the tablets, and she did, and at least she lived to see it, and she lived to see it launched, and she lived to see it in its early days. On this side, the woman on the right, I don't know, I can't remember the name. Sorry, again, I'm using old age as an excuse. The woman on the right is Paula Raftery, who worked with prisoners in Limerick prison. And one of the prisoners there, who must have done something fairly serious because he's in for a long, long time, actually single-handedly did 2 of the panels himself. Including that one there, which is working conditions on the docks. Since then, he's gone on and done a whole thing himself. We gave him the designs, and he worked off the designs, but since then, he's gone on and he's done a whole thing on the Magdalene based on photographs. But he's designed it and done it himself, and he was on the knitting and stitching show last November, and unfortunately, it's one of the things that RTE didn't cover on that occasion, but it's really wonderful work that he does. So I just flick through a few more. I can't miss this one out, or I've never be able to come into the building again. But the panel up on the right-hand side, I had to put it up twice because it's not in the, if you like, the main picture, was done here by staff in the Abbey. They made the panel of Larkin's arrest, top right-hand side on the left-hand column, and there they are. You know, Sheilog and Joseph and I'm going to miss half the names now, and Emer and Paula and so on. They're all there. My apologies if you're in the audience. Don't throw anything hard at me. But you know, that was done by people here who came forward and said, we want to take part. So Malika Iskander did a spectacular work on the Liberty Hall panel, and she came here as an asylum seeker. But she brought those skills with her, and she's Algerian. And the other group is with the president. That was one of the very first panels done when we were launching it in Liberty Hall. Stella McConnon, the granddaughter of Jim Larkin and James Connolly Heron, great-grandson of James Connolly, looking at one of the Union banners. I need to wind up. We need good backers who share your values and objectives. There we had Joe Flynn, we had Jimmy Dinahan. I've never voted Fine Gael in my life, and I doubt if I ever will, or Fianna Fáil for that matter. Ryan O'Flynn and Sally Ann Kinahan, who was really one of the power horses. Sorry, that's an unfortunate choice, but you know what I mean, someone full of dynamism and energy, and she really pushed the thing through, and that was in the National Museum. I just mentioned Ken Fleming again. This was my idea. It was one of the few ideas in the thing that I did think of. Bringing in a reenactment of the food ship worked very well. Again, involving people. Those are you know, working other jobs. Ola is a union official. I don't know what her husband does. There's their kids. There were hundreds of them like that to welcome the ship. But people got involved in reenactments and so on. National Library, 50,000 people went to that. Again, living the lockout. We begin to put stuff online now as a result of that. We're going to put the ITUC records from 1900 to 1925 online in the next couple of weeks. That's a direct result of that. Again, I'm just mentioning, you know, the Abbey, the Risen People. Athena Productions won an International Radio History Documentary Award for their series on the lockout. My Lockout on RTE television, TG Caha's Dog. kids, we did stuff. We brought kids into the Savoy. They all put on videos, and I think it was 5 schools won. This is one of the winning teams. Raid again. They worked on the top left-hand tapestry with other stitches. Localizing the lockout. Sean O'Casey's house in East Wall, local group, did that. A mural in East Wall to commemorate mass evictions in East Wall just before Christmas 1913, which people had forgotten, but they went back and checked it out, found out for themselves. The wrap on Liberty Hall. This was done by SIP2 Education Branch in Trinity College. The T-shirts, I've got one, and I've got 2 of them actually. But Liberty Hall, the wrap, we did that in conjunction with corporation. We did it that way because if we put in formal planning permission, we'd have had to wind up. Anyone could have thrown a fiver in there, IBEC or ISME or someone, stymied the whole process. It would never have happened. We're going to do the same in 2016. Okay. And just that was the last event. Alicia Brady at Glasnevin Cemetery. Hundreds of people. We didn't have any stewards. We thought there'd be 50 people there. Hundreds turned out. It was chaos, but I think people enjoyed it at the end. So that's it pretty well. Just one last thing. There was one woman, Alicia Brady, a niece of, Bridget Taylor, a niece of Alicia Brady, who was killed in the lockout, and we found it with great difficulty at the start. By last year, we had 4 nieces. So that's it. So thank you very much. So I should say, if anyone wants it, I can give anyone who wants it, give me your email address. I send you a copy of the report.
Whatever about collective bargaining and the success of the 2013 campaign, one of the casual legacies of your commemoration is the Abbey Theatre's Stitch and Bitch group, which is now an ongoing part of our therapy. Thank you very much.